How much of a difference can a healthy Jeremy Lauzon or Adam Wilsby make next season? We'll talk about the 2024-25 season that wasn't for two defensive pieces and what a healthy Lauzon and Wilsby could do to help a questionable blue line.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. We are, of course, your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Friday episode with an enthusiastic shout out to our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. I'm Kimmel. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio and friends. I have a partner in crime.
You do. I am Emma Lingan, and I'm the Nashville Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
There were a lot of issues for the Nashville Predators last season. Believe me, Emma and I lived through all 84 years of them. But one of the areas that has to get a lot of attention this offseason is the defense. Today, we're going to look at what Nashville missed out on with the injuries to Jeremy Lauzon and Adam Wilsby, and how a healthy return of these two players could affect decisions that Barry Trotz makes this offseason. Plus, friends, there has been some interesting coaching news for Predators fans. And we do want to wrap up the week giving a shout out to a couple of former Predators competing for the Stanley Cup. Before we dive into all of that, we want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Emma and I, we are trudging along. We are working through player performances from last season. Let's be honest, we didn't do grades because, like, best case scenario, maybe someone got a C. And we didn't want to do superlatives like we did last year, which was a big hit and several of them stuck, but some of them might have involved FCC non-compliant, Minka unappreciated words. So we're just kind of walking through what happened, what didn't happen, and really focusing on what has to happen next season. Emma, got to talk about two defensemen that I think you and I vaguely remember. Like, if I think really hard, I can pull up a picture of their faces. And even though we hardly saw them at all, they're going to play a role for the Nashville Predators on the blue line. We're talking about Jeremy Lauzon and Adam Wilsby. So let's kick it off with Jeremy Lauzon. I don't remember. Do you remember what superlative we gave Lauzon last year?
I think mine was, no, I'm trying to think, like, it was something, it had something to do with his, like, David Poile signing him to that extension. And at the time, people were like, what the heck are you doing? And now the extension looks good and it looks affordable. But now I don't remember the exact superlative, but it was along those lines.
Yeah, I can't remember mine either. Does that not just seem like a lifetime ago? I know we joke about last season taking forever, but so much has changed for the Nashville Predators. It's almost like we're in a totally different era here. Last season, Jeremy Lauzon, 28 games played, no goals, 1 assist. He left the game December 31st versus Minnesota Friends. That was the slow foot game. He played just over 6 minutes of ice time before he left with an injury. Friends, that's the last we saw of our good friend Jeremy Lauzon, out for the rest of the season with a lower body injury. And when I say that was the last we saw of Jeremy Lauzon, we didn't see him around the locker room. Jeremy Lauzon was getting work done on a lower body injury. Now, he is expected to be fully healthy for the start of the season. But Emma, looking back, what kind of impact do you think it had on the Predators when it comes to losing Lauzon?
I mean, it's hard after a season where so many things went wrong to, sort of piece apart what, the individual impact of each thing was, but I do think they felt it just purely from a standpoint of experience on the blue line. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, that by the end of the season, the most tenured Nashville Predators defenseman was the guy who joined the team in July, which is, oh, God bless. I mean, we already know that's just not good. And so I think that having his experience, like, that was missed. I think his size was missed. His physicality was missed. What was not missed were his penalties, because he did tend to go to the bin quite often. The timeout booth.
Yes, the timeout booth. Yes.
He would end up in the timeout booth pretty often. So, yeah, like, again, do I think that this would have been a totally different season had Jeremy Lauzon not been injured? No. But I mean, I do think that there are aspects of him, like his game and his just presence, that were definitely missed.
Yeah, he was coming off of one of his best seasons in 23-24, where he played 79 games, 6 goals. He had 14 points, which was a career high. He also set the NHL hits record. And he was just slightly under pace when he got injured to match that record. So he was still out there being very, very physical. And what I liked about Lauzon in 2023-24, and what we saw of him briefly, is that even though he does end up in the penalty box a whole lot looking for a little something to snack on, when it comes to the hits, he's very mindful and not reckless so much about that particular aspect of his game. And then you look at what happened to this team. Jeremy Lauzon and Alexander Carrier, they played the most minutes together of any defensive pair in the 2023-24 season. And then the besties for the resties got broken up because Carrier was traded to Montreal shortly before Lauzon got injured. And so you lost that pairing. And then, when the Predators traded Luke Schenn, you basically had your physical presence on the blue line evaporate. And look, nobody is like, it takes 2 of most people to make 1 Luke Schenn, but at least with Jeremy Lauzon, you knew you had that physicality. You had somebody who would drop the gloves if he needed to. And so the blue line at the end of the season didn't look at all like what Barry Trotz needs or wants it to look like. And I think part of that is Lauzon being gone. I agree with you. It's very hard to isolate in this season what connects to what, but I do think that the Predators need him back. He's not the reason that it was so porous and that the defense gave up so many goals, but they've got to get experience on this line, and it comes down to who are they going to pair him with. We are back to, how do you piece together this defense? This is something Barry Trotz is going to have to wrestle with over the offseason, and he's going to have to fix it. Coming up, we're going to speculate on who perhaps could be partnered with Jeremy Lauzon. We're also going to talk about another defenseman injured that we had just the smallest sample size of, and talk about what we want to see going forward from Adam Wilsby. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where your money went? Whether it is the cost of dining out or entertainment or online shopping, it is so easy to lose track of your finances. That is where Monarch Money comes in. It is your personal CFO. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money, it's not just another budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and all of your spending in one place. So you stop just managing money and you start building wealth. Monarch Money is a great tool for young adults just starting out on their own. It also makes financial collaboration so much easier. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals together, and stay on the same page without the extra stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Emma, the dilemma. Now that you have broken up the besties for the resties, now that the Viscount Chihuahua has left whatever Jeremy Lauzon was called last season, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with Lauzon. And remember, the Nashville Predators have a slew of left shot defensemen. And you got to figure out who you're going to pair with them. And Jeremy Lauzon is somebody who you've got to get the right partner with. He's a defensive defenseman for the most part, and you got to get the right guy with him. And I'm just going to throw something out there, mostly because if you're watching on YouTube, I want you to enjoy Emma's reaction to this. So I'm just going to throw this out here, Emma, and then I want to get your take.
I already know who it's going to be.
Well, the pickings are slim at right shot defenseman. And so what do you think? Just riddle me your thoughts. Put the fries in the bag for us, Emma, on Jeremy Lauzon with Justin Barron.
Yeah. I would prefer Justin Barron to be on the bench with Jeremy Lauzon with anyone else, frankly. But, you know, you talk about Lauzon being a defensive defenseman, which he is, and then Barron as an offensive defenseman, but he's really not even a defenseman. He's just offensive. Yeah, not offensive, but like he plays offense and that's it. And he's a bit of a liability in his own zone, to the point where I don't know that Lauzon is going to be like, whoever plays with Justin Barron has to pick up the defensive slack for two people. Like you have to pick up his slack on defense. And so I don't know that Lauzon is necessarily capable of doing that. Not saying that he's not a good, sound defenseman, but I think that the way that Lauzon plays defense is by being physical and knocking guys off of pucks. And as opposed to, not to say he doesn't block shots and doesn't do other things that you need a good defenseman to do, but I just don't know that his style of play marries well with, you know, what you would have with Barron.
Yeah.
I knew that's where you were going.
I've been waiting all day. I've been waiting all day. But, you know, you look at, and we're going to do some podcasts on this, friends, because there's a lot to dig into. You look at who Nashville currently has on the defensive roster, and there is a lot of oil and water. Players that you're just not real sure they're going to mix. And, you know, you want to get the right partner with Jeremy Lauzon, and to get the best out of him, to allow him to play, like you said, kind of play his style of play without it being a detriment based on the play of his partner. You don't have a defenseman to play right now with Roman Josi. So there is a lot that has to happen defensively for the Nashville Predators. One of the other defensemen that I really wanted to talk about, and I know we're talking small sample size, but I think it's worth talking about Adam Wilsby. He only played 23 games last season. He had a goal and 5 points. Quite frankly, friends, he had 2 goals, but the first goal was waved off because of offsides. And we remember it was heartbreaking, but Wilsby
was against Dallas. I remember.
Oh, come on, y'all. It's the line. The line is right. It's just look down. Anyway, he was called up November 27th. He got his first point December 12th. Very small sample size. But here's one thing that we know for sure. Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette really liked what they saw from Adam Wilsby until he went out with an upper body injury. And friends, that was the last we saw of Jeremy Lauzon. Jeremy Lauzon had a lot of work done during the season. Now, he is, again, a player expected to be healthy for training camp and back on track next season. I feel like he is somebody they like. Every so often, the Predators, they get a player that they're like, we like this guy. And it's not just on ice statistics, it's total package. And I think Wilsby is that. Friends, he's a Swedish defenseman. So, you know, I vote yes. Never can have enough Swedish defensemen. And so they seem high on Wilsby. I would be surprised if he didn't make the roster out of camp, but we still don't really have any idea of what we have as far as like a long-term piece with Wilsby. So when you look at just this tiny sample size and you look at what we have on the roster currently on the blue line, what do you forecast for Wilsby next season, Emma?
Yeah, well, I think that the signing of Adam Wilsby, the re-signing, I should say, of Adam Wilsby, and the quickness with which it was done, part of that had to do with the fact that you, like, as you said, you didn't get a full season of him this year. So it's kind of like adding, and it's like, all right, let's run it back and let's make next year more like your rookie year because you didn't get to play that much. But it also, to me, says a lot more about the future of Mark Del Gaiso, as does the re-signing of Andreas England, who, again, I kind of saw as like, that's your temporary Band-Aid answer to the Jeremy Lauzon injury problem. Like, that gets you to the end of the year, but the decision to re-sign him, again, he's going to be cheaper. And he's a very different style of player than like a Lauzon, or not a Lauzon, than a Wilsby or a Del Gaiso, but still.
Yeah.
To me, they really like Wilsby. Trotz loves Wilsby, which is interesting because he wasn't drafted by Trotz. But again, I'm more just kind of curious. I will answer your question with a question and think like, what does Wilsby have that Del Gaiso doesn't, that has made them, kind of decide to go this way with him? And that's something I don't know the answer to that right now. And I'm hoping that we see that, next year.
I'm going to answer that with sort of a joke, but I'm only half joking. Sometimes it feels like in the past, and I know we're under Barry Trotz and in different perspective, but I'm just throwing this out here. I'm half joking. But also, sometimes I think the stat that the Predators like the most, especially when it comes to blue liners, is inches above 6 feet. And Wilsby is a solid Swede, friends. He's like 6'1", almost 200 pounds. We talk about Mark Del Gaiso is fun size. Here's what I will say about Mark Del Gaiso. You saw Mark Del Gaiso getting people off the puck. Now, did he have some defensive breakdowns? Yes. I would like to introduce you to the entire Nashville Predators blue line.
Who among us? I mean,
potato, friends. But
breakdowns of all kinds, everybody.
I mean, if you've been following along this season, you've seen breakdowns right here.
I guess I get what you're saying about the size, though. Like, to me, for whatever reason, Adam Wilsby does not, like, I know that Del Gaiso is a smaller, like an undersized defenseman, but he played big. To me, Wilsby doesn't strike me. I don't know why, but it's not like he's not a strikingly large human to me. It's not like you walk in, it's like, oh, like, I don't know.
I mean, not Luke Schenn.
No.
Shen is freak of nature big.
Yes. Luke Schenn, Jeremy Lauzon are like, oh, like the very large men. But like those, I don't know. To me, Adam Wilsby kind of like build wise he is sort of like Dante Fabro-ish to me. So it's like not small, but not big. So I guess, I don't know. It would be, maybe I'm like, I know it's not realistic to think like, oh, well, the size difference has to be huge for it to matter. But I mean, I don't know. I think, like you said, half joking, I think there could be something to that.
And, I don't want to, beat this horse because we're going to have to do a whole episode, I fear, on this in the near future. I struggle with them not re-signing Mark Del Gaiso. And here's why. I get, you can talk about the size and you can talk about the, defensive breakdowns and all of this kind of stuff. Here's what I will say about Mark Del Gaiso, and then I will get off my soapbox. Mark Del Gaiso can handle his business against the boards. Mark Del Gaiso can probably handle his business in a dark alley in New Jersey too. Like, I don't feel like you are sacrificing a tremendous amount if you're talking about, well, he's not as big, he's not as look, Mark Del Gaizo can handle his business on and off the ice. Delightful young man. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's not a punk, but this is somebody who can play a physical game, who can get guys off pucks. And I fear we will be doing a podcast soon on Mark Del Gaizo, patron saint of Locked On Predators, has signed with blah, blah, blah. And quite frankly, friends, we're going to probably sit here next season and be like, oh, look, Mark Del Gaizo, another assist. Oh, look, Mark Del Gaizo, another secondary assist. Oh, look, Mark Del Gaizo. But anyway, that's a dead horse that we're going to probably beat later on this offseason.
Keep on beating that horse. Yes.
We are. There is such a mess, Emma, at the blue line. It's such a mess. And going into last season, I did not quite anticipate it being this bad for the Nashville Predators moving forward. So again, we're going to keep following what Barry Trotz is cooking up and what he is going to try to do to fix this before the season starts. He's got his work cut out for him on the blue line. Coming up, we are going to talk about another former Nashville Predators blue liner who performed so well in game one of the Stanley Cup Finals. We're also going to update you on some interesting coaching news. All right, Emma, we got game one of the Stanley Cup Final out of the way. And let me just tell you, I think as I watched that game, I'm like, if anybody just happened to channel flip and go, oh, okay, like it's a championship game of whatever this hockey is, I guess I'll watch it. That person is now totally addicted to hockey because that game delivered. Overtime win by the Edmonton Oilers, who were down 3-2 in the third period until Mattias Ekholm, my gateway drug into hockey, scored the tying goal, and then Leon Draisaitl won it in overtime on a power play goal. Man, you want to talk about timing is everything in a game, and you don't want to commit that penalty. That's a prime example of why you don't want to commit a silly penalty like, I don't know, too many men on the ice over and over again. I don't know. But what did you think of game one of the Stanley Cup Finals, Emma?
Cough, cough. Andrew Burnett. Too many men on the ice. I thought it was great. I thought it delivered. Both Viktor Arvidsson and Mattias Ekholm, former Preds, all over the
Total
place.
Swedes. Come on.
Yes. And Seth Jones out there for Florida. Predators Twitter was ablaze with the contributions of all of the ex-Preds in the game. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I said going into this series, was that I have been counting the Oilers out, and I'm not the only one, but like every single series, I'm like, yes, this will be the one that does them in. And every time I've been wrong, and I've kind of come around to it now. Before I kind of went into this series thinking, honestly, 50-50. Like, it could be either. I don't know. Well, see, it started as, it's going to be Florida. They're going to take them down, because that was how I went into every series, was Edmonton's going to lose. And then I kind of went from that to, honestly, 50-50. I wouldn't be surprised either way. And then the more I saw, or the more I thought about it, and the more I watched game one, I was like, you know what? Edmonton did not get back here a second time in a row to lose. Like, if they were going to get here again in a year, they were not going to lose. Like, and so that's just kind of where I'm at with it. Even though, I had my thoughts about, well, they lost Zach Hyman, and they're going to feel that. And again, game one went to overtime. I don't see them like taking this handily. I think Florida is absolutely going to put up a fight. And to be honest, I won't be completely stunned if Florida wins either. But I just think that Edmonton, you really see it now, that it's like they were so sorry, Minka, pissed off after last season.
Oh, gosh.
And the way it ended, that they were like, yeah, if they made it if they made it this far, they're not losing.
Yeah. And they have had 9 lives through these playoffs, because I agree with you. There were times where you're like, oh my gosh, I think this opponent kind of has them. The moment that this turned around for me, and I should have looked it up. The moment where I was like, is there was a game, and you'll know what I'm talking about, and our listeners will know what I'm talking about. There was a game where they were just absolutely spanked. I mean, spanked. I think it was in the conference finals, maybe against Dallas. And there was just this moment where Draisaitl and McDavid sitting on the bench, and they just looked at each other and looked ahead. And I thought, oh,
it was game 1. It was game 1
is that what it was?
Dallas, because that was the only game that Dallas won in that series, and they beat them like 7-2 or something. And that was their origin story. That was their villain origin story. Like the monster was born. It
was just a look between the two of them, and it just sent shivers up my spine. Like, oh, I'm a little bit scared about what's coming next. And here we are. Here we are. So I loved it. Look, I make no bones about it. I would really love to see Edmonton win this. I am with you. I think this is who's going to win it. I don't know, but it feels like this is going to be a 7-game series, and we're going to be on the edge of our seats, which is great for hockey, but terrible for my nerves. Terrible.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just so funny because yes, it's a rematch between the same two teams, but they come in very different scenarios this time. I mean, both teams were in third place in their respective divisions as they get there. Get to the final. They were, the lower seed through like most of the playoffs. And now and like you said, both teams, I think in a way, Florida too has kind of had 9 lives. Florida had not so much in the playoffs, but down the stretch of the regular season, they dealt with a lot of injuries. They had a lot of setbacks, and they just kind of honestly stopped caring about seeding. I mean, they would never say it this way, but they're like, we're in the playoffs. We really don't care about home ice. It's like, just get us there and we'll see what happens. And while that is not, an advisable strategy for any team in the playoffs, it works for a team like that. And I think, they did. I mean, they went all in. They went and added the pieces that they could. I mean, when you have Brad Marchand as your 4th line center, and to me, he has been sort of a fascinating study for me, I think, where you see him go. Obviously, he's that pesky, face-licking, choke-holding,
guy,
agitator. But he's also very skilled. He was a guy that always bothered me because I'm like, you don't need to do all that stuff. Like, you're actually very good. You make an impact on the game in other ways. Like, you don't need to do that, but he did. I do think getting the captaincy in Boston subdued him a little bit. I think it toned down. It didn't completely get rid of the antics, but it toned him down. Now he's back in Florida, and I think we're kind of watching him go back to his roots a little bit as that gritty 4th line, undersized, like, I'm gonna mix it up and I'm gonna be a menace back there and just get under guys' skin. And it's almost like a full circle thing for him. And it's like, wow, you see, that's like, he can do both really, really well. He can impact the game as a dynamic scorer, but he can also do it as a pest. And Florida, like, just the roster construction in Florida, I think has been chef's kiss.
It's so fascinating. It's something that we're going to talk about this offseason. We're going to look at Edmonton's roster construction, Florida's roster construction. But I will tell you this, eye test alone, watching that game last night. And look, that game 1 was the most elevated hockey I think that we have seen all season long and in the postseason. I mean, you watched this game and you knew this was game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals by the way these two teams were battling. And it takes you a moment to connect that to what we saw on the ice at Bridgestone Arena. And so there's a lot to unpack. You got to get from point A to point B, and friends, like, MapQuest ain't going to get you there quick.
It's not, it feels like point A to point W. Like, it's so far away. And
so far away.
This is the most fun I've had I've been doing the playoff live shows with the hockey news, and I'm like, this is the most fun I've had covering hockey in 84 years because it's good hockey.
It is. It is. Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of former Predators doing things, do want to shout out former Predators assistant coach Dan Muse. Dan Muse was named the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I got to tell you, I was like, no, wait a minute, is that the same? Damn, I thought this was such an interesting hire. Some people are like, Sidney Crosby is gonna want to know what that's about. Well, let's see what happens. I think this is interesting. Of course, he was here in Nashville and then went on to the Rangers with Laviolette as well. What do you think about this hire, Emma?
I think, I mean, a little surprising in the sense that from everything I read, everything I heard, that Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh were casting this extremely wide net. They did this exhaustive search to find their next coach. So it's in that sense, it feels like this guy came a little bit out of left field because it's not like a name that you hear a lot every time there's a coaching vacancy. You're not like, oh, you know, so in that way, it was a little bit out of left field. It's like, really, out of all the names, like all the frequent flyers, the ones that you hear a lot, it's like that, really? That's what you came up with? And I don't mean that in a negative way per se. It's more just like surprising. But I think the more I read about him, because I wasn't here covering the Predators yet when he was in Nashville. So I didn't get the chance to really like see him up close. And at that point too, it was so early in his career. I think that was his first NHL job, was being an assistant under Lavi in the 2017 to 2020. But I think the more I read about him, the more I learn about him, seems like he's very, like what he's known for is his ability to develop players and stick with them, and he's not like Mike Sullivan is a win now coach, and that's fine, you know, but Pittsburgh is not a win now team. They're trying to be because they still have Sidney Crosby, and as long as you have Sidney Crosby, you can't tear it down, you know?
Right.
And so they were trying, but the more I read about this and how this is a clearly a player development hire, I really like this for Pittsburgh, because I think that they're committing to essentially the rebuild.
Kind of a softer rebuild around.
Yes. Yeah. They're putting their money where their mouth is now and saying, like, you know what, we're going to try to, you know, we're basically, the jig is up and we're not fooling anybody. We know we're not fooling anybody right now. We're not winning any Stanley Cups right now. So let's just lean into it, kind of steer into the skid a little bit and get a coach who is better, like, to meet this roster where they're at. And if you look at, I forget the number, but I mean, the Penguins have a crap ton of draft picks over the next 2 years too. So a little bit Predator-esque in that regard. So I don't know. I think, I mean, we'll find out, but on paper, I think it's a good hire for them and for where the organization is at.
Yeah. Here's another coaching thing that we could spend a lot of time on, but we're not going to dive deep into this, but I think it's interesting of note that Karl Taylor has signed an extension as the coach with the Milwaukee Admirals. Look, I love this. I have said on this podcast before, I really like Karl Taylor. I have heard people squawk, and I find this interesting. They're like, why would you hire Karl Taylor? Clearly he cannot develop players. And I'm like, well, it's a question of who is developing players and who is discharging players into the NHL, and how does that process effectively? I think you got to be really, really careful looking at the situation with the Admirals and the Predators and going, oh, well, it is the responsibility and the fault of the AHL coach that these players don't thrive in the NHL. That is a lot to unpack there. Can I take out my Friday drama cauldron here?
Yes.
I am not a fan of the drama cauldron, but it's Friday. So I'm like, this is just if I were Karl Taylor. This is just if I were Karl Taylor, I would have signed that extension too. Because if I'm just throwing this out here, I'm not reporting, I'm just talking on a podcast. But if things go south early for the Nashville Predators and Barry Trotz has to make a change, and if that change has to come behind the bench, if I'm Karl Taylor, I'm going to be like, hey, because he was interviewed for this job before Andrew Brunette got it. And I'm all I'm saying is I'm really happy that Karl Taylor stuck around. I'm not speaking anything into existence, but I am stirring a little teeny tiny drama ramekin.
Drama ramekin, yes.
Drama ramekin.
No, I think that's totally fair. I also think that as far as his ability to develop players, can we look at the hand that he's been given? Like,
again, Nashville on average over the last 10 years, they are averaging the 20th overall pick. The 20th overall pick, y'all.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, like, you can't, it's low hanging fruit. It's very easy. You want to be able to blame one guy for that, but it's not that simple. So but back to your little, I will add my spoon to the drama ramekin because I think that's might not be far off with that take.
I'm just saying.
It's good to have in your back pocket.
I mean, look, I would keep Karl Taylor near, not far. I would keep Karl Taylor near, not far. Look, no idea what is going to happen with the Nashville Predators next season. We do know that Barry Trotz has his work cut out for him. He is spending time with the scouting department right now. They are going to be spending the weekend in Buffalo at the NHL Draft Combine, where we are going to get a look at some of these young players that Nashville could select with the 5th overall pick. On next week's shows, we're going to share with you what we learned from the Combine. I'm going to let you know if somebody booted near me doing the physical fitness test. But we will have much more important hockey-related content as well. So make sure you tune in next week. We're going to be talking about these young draftees and who looked good and what information we learned from what Nashville saw and liked up here in Buffalo. Before we log off for the weekend, though, Emma, before I start getting nervous about somebody yakking during the VO2 max test, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingan, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. I'll be tweeting out from the Combine too, so keep an eye on social media there. And like I said, next week, Emma and I are going to bring you all the details on the draftees that we got a chance to see. That is going to do it for this week's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Y'all, thanks for making us your first listen of the day this week and each day. We hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you Monday.